Let's talk about Donald Trump. He has picked a beef with Africa. First, he cut all foreign aid to the region and then targeted South Africa over a land bill. Politics apart, the aid cuts are having real consequences on the ground. 7 African countries that received 20% of all aid have been hit the hardest. So as the US leaves a sudden vacuum in Africa, a country far away was waiting for just this. The dragon has the money, the power, and a vested interest. So is China capitalizing on US's Africa apathy? Will this allow US rivals to get a grip on Africa? And what does this mean for the new world order? I'm Ananya Datta for Hindustan Times. Let's get some answers. During his first term as US President, Donald Trump showed very little interest in Africa. But it's different this time. The US President, who has been in office for less than a month, has managed to alienate many of the African nations, either through aid cuts towards HIV programs in Ghana or trade cuts with South Africa. As the saying goes, when one door shuts, another one opens. And in this case, there is Xi Jinping waiting by the open door, ready to welcome Africa. China has invested thoroughly in the African continent, and it started a decade back, almost predicting US's foreign policy. Trade relations are strong, investments in energy and agriculture are skyrocketing, and Chinese firms are dominant in infrastructure. And while Trump's attention has been on the land, China is looking at the sky. On the outskirts of Cairo sits a cutting-edge lab that produces satellites. From the looks of it, it could be a sign of African prowess. The lab is producing homegrown satellites for the very first time in whole of Africa. But there's a catch. You step inside the plant and it's a dragon's den. A Chinese flag hangs from one wall and there are crates of equipment all imported from Beijing. Chinese scientists are scanning space tracking monitors and delivering instructions to local engineers. The first satellite assembled at this very factory was built mainly in China and launched from a spaceport there 2 years ago. And think about it, Egypt is a major recipient of US military aid and has still been drawn into China's orbit. What will happen to the smaller players? Where Beijing is promising to send donations, satellites, technology, and giving them a sense of being part of the space race, all to become the world's dominant space power itself. Reuters is reporting for the very first time that China has managed to convince its African partners to get access to data and images collected from these very space technology. Africa is in a tough spot. The United States is practically abandoning them with Trump's my way or the highway attitude, while Xi Jinping has managed to find the middle ground. In a meeting last year, Xi invited dozens of African leaders to Beijing and told them that they are his priority. He announced a $50 billion loan and investment for space programs earmarked for Africa over the next 3 years. And Xi is giving a global good touch to the plan, that no country should be left behind in space technology. Today, Beijing has 23 bilateral space partnerships in Africa, including funding for satellites and ground stations to collect data. Egypt, South Africa, and Senegal have already agreed to collaborate with China on a future moon base, a project that rivals the United States' own lunar plans. China's rapid expansion of its space infrastructure is an example that Beijing is catching up with Washington on everything. Privately, China is getting far more in return for its investments in Africa. It is able to establish a global surveillance network, one that has surveillance data and permanent presence across Africa. While the Chinese embassy in Washington has rubbished all of the allegations of using the infrastructure to spy on any country, the possibility still exists. Access to a broad range of Chinese-built, foreign-owned satellites gives Beijing the ability to better coordinate military operations. Now, these satellites could also give China a clearer picture of US military activities around the world. Like this report from 2022 by the US Defense Intelligence Agency says that China's space sensors can predict military satellites passing and, if necessary, can be targeted too. Let's paint a picture here. In a time of conflict, say China invades Taiwan, Beijing could be in a position to knock out an enemy satellite, and that could disrupt missile guidance systems and tangle communications. The United States, which is Africa's largest trading partner, is reversing old policies. Trump's idea of trade isn't like Joe Biden's. The businessman in him sees every policy as transactional. So in the negotiation process, he's losing key allies like South Africa, which may not match Trump's trade, but is strategic to keep US rivals at bay. As China advances its relationship in Africa with technology, the United States is pulling back. Just today, Elon Musk, who is the CEO of SpaceX and heading Trump's Doge project, is going to review NASA's spending. We can talk about conflict of interest, but this goes beyond it. It means carving out space for China to thrive. So Trump's foreign policy is going against its defense policy. The Pentagon has been constantly calling China's project in Africa a security risk. But the US president is fixated on trade.
I think there's a risk that the way Trump approaches international affairs will alienate a lot of people. And I think he's already run through a lot of goodwill that the United States has built up very painfully over the years. It would be better for us to deal with what is really the main problem in a joint way, getting people who want an international free trade system to work, rather than the U.S. getting into a fight with its closest friends and allies and having China only as kind of one of the participants. It makes no sense from the perspective of what the real problem is, which is China.
It seems like the ball is in China's court as United States is busy playing a different sport. This time it's space. Next time it could be tech, infra, or even military. What if it's like a musical chair where Trump exits and Xi enters? What will that mean for the power pedestal that the United States has put itself on? More importantly, what will it mean for the world order at large?
What the changes in India's population and the differential growth rates.
This city has emerged.
We have a very special guest on the record.
The interview.
The role that the US side played at that point of time.
पूरी दुनिया की नजर.
Assume my phone is tapped. I can probably say hello to Mr. Modi.
आपके भारत पर है.
Episode of Know Your Candidate.
The rising confidence of India under Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Communist China is the greatest threat.
There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremist.
I'm still a little perplexed by why we.
Your daily dose of news from India and across the world. Cutting edge views and analysis. Tune into HT videos. Click on the bell icon to subscribe.